This is the latest development on the future of USAID after both President Trump and, maybe more importantly, Elon Musk said it needed to be shut down.
There are new questions about Elon Musk's role. He's now been classified a special government employee. So what does this mean?
Elon Musk's recent remarks about the United States Agency for International Development, USAID, have sent shockwaves through both the political and global arenas. Musk boldly declared that it's time for USAID to die, sparking intense debates about the future of US foreign aid. But what prompted Musk's explosive statement, and what shocking findings did his team uncover within the USAID building? Stay with us as we dive into the full story behind Musk's controversial revelation, the investigation, and the far-reaching implications of his actions. Before we dive into Musk's shocking claims, it's essential to first understand the significant role USAID has played in shaping US foreign policy for decades. How did the agency become such a cornerstone of global development, and why is Musk targeting it now? Let's take a closer look at USAID's history and its influence around the world. USAID's role in US foreign policy. The United States Agency for International Development, USAID, was founded in 1961 by President John F. Kennedy as a means of providing economic, technical, and humanitarian assistance to developing countries. The agency's core mission has been to promote global development, support economic growth, and alleviate poverty. USAID has historically been one of the primary instruments of US foreign policy and has been a key player in shaping the geopolitical landscape by fostering democratic principles, promoting health and education, and responding to humanitarian crises. In terms of scale, USAID operates in more than 100 countries, with its budget regularly surpassing $20 billion annually. The agency focuses on several key areas: global health, including the fight against HIV, AIDS, and malaria, poverty alleviation, education, disaster relief, and governance. Through its various programs, USAID has made significant strides in addressing some of the world's most pressing challenges. For instance, its health programs have helped reduce the prevalence of diseases such as tuberculosis and malaria in sub-Saharan Africa. Additionally, USAID's work in Asia has bolstered economic development and helped reduce hunger and malnutrition. Despite its successes, USAID has faced increasing scrutiny over the years. Critics argue that the agency's effectiveness has been hindered by inefficiency and mismanagement. Issues such as bloated administrative costs, the slow pace of aid disbursement, and a lack of long-term impact have led to questions about the value of US foreign aid. Some have pointed out that USAID's programs often focus on short-term fixes rather than creating sustainable, long-lasting solutions. Others have raised concerns about the transparency of the agency, with reports of wasteful spending, poorly managed projects, and insufficient oversight. In addition, USAID's relationship with the US government has been controversial. While it's theoretically independent, the agency often aligns with US geopolitical goals, leading to accusations of using aid as a tool for political leverage. This has led to concerns that USAID's activities sometimes reflect the interests of the US government rather than the needs of the countries it serves. Furthermore, USAID's tendency to allocate aid based on strategic priorities rather than solely on humanitarian concerns has led to skepticism about its true motivations. With these issues at the forefront, many have questioned whether USAID's approach to foreign aid is still relevant in today's global landscape. Some argue that in an era of increased global connectivity and technological innovation, the traditional methods of delivering aid may no longer be effective. Musk himself has voiced concerns about government-run programs like USAID, suggesting that private sector-driven solutions might be more efficient in tackling global challenges. But what exactly sparked Musk's bold declaration that USAID should die? What investigation into the agency's operations left him and many others shocked? Let's dive into the events that triggered Musk's radical stance. Elon Musk's influence in the Trump administration, Elon Musk's rise to prominence in the business world as the CEO of Tesla and SpaceX, has been nothing short of extraordinary. His companies have revolutionized the automotive and aerospace industries, reshaping the future of transportation and space exploration. Musk's success as an entrepreneur has afforded him significant influence over various aspects of US policy, particularly in the areas of technology and innovation. But his influence has not been limited to the private sector. In recent years, Musk has also become a prominent figure in US government circles, particularly under the Trump administration. In 2024, President Donald Trump appointed Musk to lead a new initiative focused on government efficiency. This initiative, known as the Department of Government Efficiency, DOG, was tasked with investigating and reforming federal agencies that were deemed outdated, inefficient, or wasteful. Musk's appointment was seen as an indication that the Trump administration was willing to take bold steps to reform the bureaucracy. Musk's vision for government reform was rooted in his belief that the private sector's competitive, results-driven mindset could be applied to government operations. As a result, his approach to government efficiency was decidedly different from that of traditional political figures. Musk's primary goal within the Trump administration was to streamline the government's operations, reducing waste, inefficiency, and excessive spending. His success in running businesses with razor-sharp efficiency made him the perfect candidate for this role. Under his leadership, DOGE quickly launched investigations into several federal agencies with a special focus on those responsible for foreign aid, such as USAID. Musk's deep concerns about government inefficiency and waste were key motivators for his involvement in the department, and his work soon began to draw attention. When Musk and his team began reviewing USAID's operations, they quickly realized that the agency's internal structure and its management of funds were riddled with inefficiencies. Programs that were meant to help impoverished nations had become bogged down by bureaucracy, with funds often wasted on administrative costs rather than reaching the people who needed them most. Musk, who had no tolerance for inefficiency, began to push for reforms that would not only streamline operations but also radically change how the agency approached foreign aid. It was during this investigation that Musk began to question whether USAID, as an institution, could ever become the efficient, results-oriented organization it needed to be. His concerns about its ability to deliver on its mission grew more pronounced, and he began advocating for a rethinking of the entire approach to foreign aid. Musk believed that government-run aid programs like USAID were fundamentally flawed, and that private companies and philanthropic organizations might be better suited to address the world's most pressing challenges. But Musk's concerns weren't just about inefficiency. His team's investigation into USAID's operations revealed even deeper issues. What shocking discoveries did they make that led Musk to call for the agency's dissolution? The confrontation at USAID headquarters. Elon Musk's investigation into the US Agency for International Development took an unexpected turn when his team encountered substantial resistance from senior officials within the agency. USAID, long considered a cornerstone of US foreign policy, operates with a deeply entrenched bureaucratic structure, which made any external scrutiny particularly challenging. Given the agency's prominence and influence, many of its officials were protective of their operations, leading to an initial reluctance to cooperate with Musk's team. Despite these barriers, Musk and his team remained determined to investigate how the agency allocated its resources and the efficiency of its operations. At the core of Musk's investigation was a desire to understand how billions of dollars in foreign aid were being spent and whether the funds were reaching the intended recipients effectively. With its extensive global programs, USAID has considerable resources under its management. Musk's team requested access to the agency's financial records and detailed reports about the various programs USAID supports worldwide. However, USAID officials reportedly expressed reluctance to share this sensitive information. They raised concerns about the potential risks of exposing classified data, given the scale of the agency's work. This resistance quickly escalated into a standoff between Musk's team and USAID, with Musk insisting that transparency was critical to any meaningful reform. The situation became more tense when Musk, supported by President Trump, made a public call for full access to USAID's records. The Trump administration, known for its push toward greater government transparency and efficiency, backed Musk's efforts to obtain this information. Under growing pressure from both Musk and the administration, USAID eventually allowed Musk's team to access its headquarters and review the agency's financial documents. What they reportedly found was concerning. The financial records revealed that millions of dollars allocated for foreign aid were being spent on administrative overhead instead of the projects that were intended to help those in need. For example, programs in sub-Saharan Africa aimed at improving agricultural practices were allegedly spending more on administrative costs than on the initiatives themselves. This raised questions about the effectiveness and efficiency of the agency's programs. Even more troubling were reports suggesting that some funds were mismanaged or misdirected, further raising concerns about the agency's ability to properly manage its resources. One case that drew particular attention involved a health initiative in Southeast Asia intended to combat malaria. Despite receiving millions of dollars, the program reportedly failed to achieve its stated goals. Musk's team allegedly discovered mismanagement, insufficient oversight, and poor coordination with local authorities. What was particularly alarming was that despite these issues, the program continued to receive funding, raising questions about the effectiveness of USAID's internal oversight and accountability mechanisms. These revelations raised even more questions about the true effectiveness of USAID. What did Musk's team uncover next, and how did they respond to these shocking discoveries? Shocking revelations. The investigation into USAID's operations. As Musk's team delved deeper into USAID's operations, they uncovered a series of troubling patterns that cast doubt on the agency's efficiency, effectiveness, and transparency. One of the most concerning discoveries was USAID's heavy reliance on contractors and consultants. The agency has long outsourced a significant portion of its projects to third-party contractors, often at considerable cost. While outsourcing is common in government operations, Musk's team found that many contractors underperformed and overcharged for services that were either subpar or redundant. One example of this was a major infrastructure project in the Middle East, where USAID had contracted a private construction company to build critical infrastructure. Despite receiving millions in funding, the project suffered from consistent delays, cost overruns, and reports of substandard work. In some cases, roads and bridges constructed with USAID funds were allegedly found to be structurally unsound and unsafe. This raised the question: could USAID have been more diligent in overseeing contractors and ensuring that taxpayer dollars were being spent effectively? Was there an adequate system in place to monitor and enforce quality standards? The investigation also revealed that some USAID programs appeared to be driven by political motives rather than purely humanitarian objectives. This was especially apparent in regions where US geopolitical interests aligned with the aid programs. For instance, in parts of Latin America, some programs seemed to prioritize political and strategic goals over the welfare of local populations. Aid appeared to be channeled into regions of strategic importance to US foreign policy, which led Musk's team to ask whether USAID's focus was truly on aiding the most vulnerable or whether it was influenced by political agendas. Furthermore, Musk's team discovered a lack of accountability and oversight in many of USAID's programs. There seemed to be very few checks in place to ensure that projects were being executed according to plan and achieving their intended outcomes. In some cases, formal evaluations designed to assess the success of a project were either non-existent or ignored. Even when evaluations did occur, there were concerns that the results were manipulated or altered to present more favorable outcomes. This lack of transparency raised doubts about whether USAID was truly learning from its mistakes and improving its operations over time. With these revelations, Musk's team questioned whether USAID was truly fulfilling its mission. Was it effectively allocating resources to the areas of greatest need, or was it distracted by political pressures and inefficient management practices? Could reforms be made to increase transparency, improve accountability, and ensure that the agency's resources were being used effectively to benefit those who needed it most? With these revelations in hand, Musk and the Trump administration moved forward with plans to overhaul USAID. But how did they respond to the systemic failures they uncovered, and what drastic measures did they take? The Trump administration's bold move. In response to the shocking findings from the investigation into USAID, the Trump administration, under the guidance of Elon Musk, made a bold decision to overhaul the agency. This move was more than just an effort to reform USAID, it was a mission to redefine how the US approached foreign aid, making it more efficient, results-driven, and aligned with the challenges of a changing global landscape. The first step in this ambitious plan was a comprehensive restructuring of USAID's operations. Musk and his team firmly believed that, in order for USAID to be truly effective, the agency had to be stripped of its bureaucratic layers and given the flexibility to operate more like a private sector organization. One of the most significant actions taken was the dismissal of over 1,600 USAID employees. Many of these employees had been with the agency for years, with deep institutional knowledge and long-established relationships in the field. While this move sparked controversy, Musk and Trump argued that it was a necessary step to remove entrenched interests and bring in fresh perspectives that could drive real change. They saw the layoffs as a critical effort to reduce inefficiency and streamline operations, enabling USAID to become more agile and responsive. Critics of the decision contended that these experienced workers had valuable expertise and relationships that were essential for the agency's ability to operate effectively. They argued that removing such a large portion of the workforce could cripple the agency's operations and undermine the effectiveness of its humanitarian missions. However, Musk and Trump maintained that these workers were part of the systemic problems that plagued the agency. They believed that a leaner, more focused workforce would be better equipped to tackle the challenges ahead. Another key change was a complete re-evaluation of USAID's programs. Many of the agency's long-standing initiatives, which had been criticized for being ineffective or outdated, were either cancelled or restructured. Programs that failed to deliver measurable results were discontinued, and new programs were introduced with a renewed focus on efficiency and long-term impact. Furthermore, Musk pushed for a closer collaboration between the public and private sectors, believing that businesses could play a larger role in solving global problems. By leveraging the innovation and resources of private companies, Musk envisioned a new model of foreign aid, one that combined government support with private sector expertise. This approach aimed to create a more dynamic and responsive system, better equipped to address pressing global issues like poverty, disease, and climate change. While the Trump administration's actions were hailed as necessary reforms by some, they were met with strong opposition from others. Would these changes improve the effectiveness of US foreign aid, or would they harm those who needed help the most? Public backlash and criticism. The sweeping changes initiated by the Trump administration in regard to USAID's structure and operations were met with significant controversy. The news of mass layoffs, program cancellations, and the agency's overall restructuring led to widespread criticism both within the United States and internationally. Humanitarian organizations, former USAID employees, and international development experts voiced strong opposition to the reforms, fearing that they would have severe consequences for some of the world's most vulnerable populations. Activists and critics argued that dismantling USAID's long-established programs could leave millions of people without the critical humanitarian aid they depend on. While acknowledging the agency's imperfections, critics contended that USAID had proven to be one of the few reliable mechanisms for delivering vital support to countries in need. The administration's proposal to replace the agency with a model driven by private sector principles faced intense resistance from those who feared that such a shift would undermine the effectiveness of international aid. The backlash was particularly strong in Washington, D.C., with key figures, including former USAID Administrator Samantha Power, expressing their disapproval. These critics emphasized the potential negative impacts of restructuring and laid out concerns about the prioritization of U.S. interests over global humanitarian goals. Media outlets covered these voices of opposition, reflecting the growing concerns about the direction the administration was taking. While the criticism was primarily focused on USAID's restructuring, it also highlighted broader concerns about the direction of US foreign policy under Trump's leadership. Critics of the reform efforts saw the move as indicative of a larger trend of isolationism and a retreat from global cooperation. The Trump administration's emphasis on reducing foreign aid and prioritizing American interests raised alarms among those who viewed it as a departure from the US's historical role as a global leader in humanitarian efforts. Despite the widespread opposition, the Trump administration remained resolute in its commitment to the overhaul of USAID. Elon Musk, who was instrumental in guiding the reforms, defended the changes, asserting that the old system had been inefficient and that a new, more results-oriented approach was necessary to meet the challenges of a rapidly changing global landscape. Musk argued that the private sector, with its innovation and efficiency, could play a pivotal role in addressing global problems, suggesting that government bureaucracy should no longer be the central model for international aid. As the protests raged on and the world watched in anticipation, the question remained: would the new approach to foreign aid lead to a brighter future or create new challenges? Let's examine the potential implications of these changes for the future of US foreign policy. The global response to USAID's collapse. As changes to USAID began to take shape under the Trump administration, the international community responded with a mixture of skepticism, concern, and, in some cases, cautious interest. Countries that had long been recipients of US foreign aid expressed their apprehensions about the future of assistance they had long depended on. USAID had been a critical lifeline for many developing nations, providing not only financial resources but also technical expertise, disaster relief, and infrastructure development. The global response to the restructuring of USAID was particularly pronounced in regions that had been significant beneficiaries of US assistance. In sub-Saharan Africa, for example, USAID's role had been vital in supporting health initiatives, educational programs, and agricultural development. Many African leaders and development organizations voiced concerns that the proposed cuts and changes could negatively impact their country's long-term growth and stability. USAID's programs, which focused on combating diseases like HIV/AIDS, malaria, and tuberculosis, and improving food security, had been fundamental to progress in these areas. The announcement of USAID reforms raised fears that these gains would be jeopardized. In response, some African nations began to explore alternative sources of aid and development collaboration, particularly looking towards China, which had been increasing its investments and aid efforts in the region in recent years. China's growing influence in Africa through both economic partnerships and development projects meant that African governments had options other than traditional Western aid. While this shift doesn't fully replace the need for US assistance, it does indicate a growing diversification of foreign aid sources, driven in part by changing geopolitical dynamics. Similarly, in the Middle East, where USAID had been deeply involved in providing humanitarian relief, rebuilding war-torn regions like Syria and Iraq, the reduction of US aid prompted widespread concern. The United Nations, alongside various non-governmental organizations, raised alarms that USAID's reduced presence could destabilize efforts to rebuild infrastructure and deliver critical services in these conflict-stricken areas. Humanitarian workers emphasize the importance of maintaining reliable, long-term assistance in fragile regions, something that could be harder to guarantee under the new model of aid delivery envisioned by the Trump administration. The United Nations Development Programme, UNDP, a key player in international development, was one of the most vocal critics of the planned changes. UNDP officials warned that the shift away from government-led foreign aid in favor of increased reliance on private sector companies could undermine global development goals. They cautioned that, while private companies could bring innovation and efficiency to some aid efforts, the complexities of development required the stability, long-term commitment, and broad international coordination that only governments and multilateral organizations could provide. They expressed concerns that prioritizing corporate interests could shift focus away from the poorest and most vulnerable populations, potentially compromising humanitarian objectives. Despite the backlash, some countries, particularly in Southeast Asia and Latin America, were more open to the private sector-driven approach. These regions have seen increasing involvement from private companies in development projects, and some governments expressed interest in exploring new ways of addressing global challenges such as poverty, infrastructure development, and education. While the bulk of international opinion remained critical of the proposed reforms, this shift towards private sector involvement was beginning to spark debate about the future of foreign aid. In the face of the global criticism, Musk's team stood firm, arguing that the future of foreign aid needed to be innovative, cost-effective, and focused on measurable outcomes. Musk's vision emphasized the need for a more dynamic approach that combined private sector efficiency with government resources. While the global community largely viewed the restructuring as a significant departure from traditional foreign aid models, the debate sparked important conversations about how to best address the world's most pressing issues. But while the global community grappled with these changes, it was clear that Musk's vision for foreign aid was reshaping the landscape in ways that many weren't ready to accept. What did the future hold for the new foreign aid system, and how would it affect the recipients of aid? Let's explore the long-term implications of these bold changes. The future of US foreign aid, Musk's vision. Elon Musk's vision for US foreign aid is one that fundamentally challenges the traditional system of government-run programs like USAID. Musk has been vocal about his belief that the private sector, with its capacity for innovation, efficiency, and scalability, should play a larger role in addressing global challenges. According to Musk, the current model of foreign aid, which is heavily dependent on government-run organizations, is outdated and inefficient. In his view, the future of aid should be driven by business-minded solutions that prioritize measurable results and long-term impact. Musk's argument is that governments, no matter how well-intentioned, often struggle with bureaucratic inefficiency and lack of accountability. His goal is to reduce government involvement in aid delivery and increase the role of businesses and philanthropic organizations that are nimbler and results-focused. Musk envisions a future where global problems, such as poverty, disease, and climate change, are addressed by collaborative efforts between private companies, international organizations, and governments. One key element of Musk's vision is leveraging technology to tackle global challenges. Musk's companies, Tesla, SpaceX, Neuralink, and others, are at the forefront of innovation, and he believes that these innovations could be harnessed to solve some of the world's most pressing problems. For example, Musk sees clean energy and sustainable technology as essential components of future foreign aid. He has suggested that a greater emphasis on renewable energy solutions, such as solar power, could help address energy poverty in regions like sub-Saharan Africa, where millions of people still lack access to electricity. Another critical part of Musk's vision is using data and AI to optimize aid delivery. With the rapid advancement of artificial intelligence and machine learning, Musk believes that technology can help identify the most effective interventions, streamline the distribution of resources, and measure outcomes more accurately. This data-driven approach would ensure that aid is targeted more effectively, leading to better outcomes for the people who need it most. Furthermore, Musk has emphasized the importance of transparency in foreign aid. In his view, organizations receiving foreign aid should be held accountable for their use of funds, with clear metrics for success. Musk's approach to foreign aid would involve a system of open reporting and audits, ensuring that every dollar spent can be traced back to specific results. This level of accountability, he argues, would lead to greater trust and confidence in the foreign aid system. As the US government moves forward with these reforms, it's clear that the future of foreign aid will look very different from what it has in the past. While there are undoubtedly challenges to Musk's vision, particularly in terms of global cooperation and aligning the interests of various stakeholders, his proposals have sparked an important conversation about the role of government and the private sector in solving global problems. While Musk's vision for foreign aid may have its supporters, it also faces significant challenges and criticisms. How will his bold approach hold up against the realities of global cooperation and humanitarian work? The challenges and controversies of Musk's foreign aid model. Despite the boldness and innovation of Musk's foreign aid vision, there are numerous challenges and criticisms that could undermine its success. One of the main concerns is the potential for private companies to prioritize profit over the humanitarian needs of the world's poorest populations. Critics argue that the business model Musk advocates for could lead to a system in which the primary goal is not alleviating poverty or improving health, but generating revenue for private corporations. Many humanitarian organizations have expressed concerns that Musk's approach could exacerbate inequality rather than solve it. They worry that relying on private companies could result in aid being concentrated in regions that are economically viable, while the most impoverished and conflict-ridden areas may receive less attention. In these places, it may be more challenging for private companies to operate profitably, which could lead to the neglect of the world's most vulnerable people. Moreover, the push for greater privatization of foreign aid raises questions about accountability and oversight. Government-run programs like USAID are often subject to strict regulations and scrutiny, but the same cannot be said for private companies. While businesses may be motivated by innovation and efficiency, there is concern that they might not be as transparent or responsive to the needs of the people they are supposed to help. If aid becomes increasingly privatized, it could lead to a system where decisions are made based on market forces rather than humanitarian principles. Another significant challenge is the coordination between various stakeholders. In Musk's vision, a combination of private companies, governments, and NGOs would work together to deliver aid. However, coordinating such a complex system could prove difficult. Different organizations have different priorities, processes, and expectations, and aligning them in a way that ensures effective aid delivery will be a monumental task. Furthermore, private companies may be reluctant to share data or collaborate openly with other organizations, especially if doing so compromises their competitive advantage. Lastly, there is the question of sustainability. Critics argue that private sector-driven aid models may lead to short-term projects that focus on quick wins rather than long-term sustainable development. Traditional government programs, on the other hand, often take a more holistic approach that seeks to build lasting infrastructure and address systemic issues. Musk's emphasis on efficiency and measurable outcomes may overlook the complexities and nuances of global development, making it harder to create lasting change. Elon Musk's radical approach to reforming US foreign aid has sparked a global debate about the future of humanitarian assistance. While his vision for a more efficient, results-oriented system of aid has its merits, it also faces significant challenges, particularly in terms of ensuring equity, accountability, and sustainability. As Musk pushes for a shift away from government-run aid programs like USAID and towards a model driven by private companies and philanthropic organizations, the world watches with both anticipation and concern. Can Musk's private sector-driven approach deliver the transformative change he envisions, or will it lead to greater inequality and inefficiency? Only time will tell. As this debate unfolds, it's clear that the future of foreign aid is up for debate, and the lessons learned from this pivotal moment in US foreign policy will shape the course of global humanitarian efforts for years to come. Thanks for watching. If you found Musk's shocking discoveries and the transformation of USAID fascinating, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more content. Share your thoughts in the comments below. How do you think these changes will impact the future of foreign aid? See you in the next video.